Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Sunday, March 1st, 2026, and we're glad to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
So today, for you listening at home, we are opening up a file that, honestly, at first glance, looks like a terrifying wall of calculus.
Oh, it really does.
It's a new framework from Google DeepMind, and it's called Unified Latents, or UL for short. But stick with us, because this isn't, well, it's not really a story about math.
No, not at all. It's actually a story about a war.
A war.
A war between two opposing forces that has basically been raging inside every AI model for the last decade.
Okay, lay it out for us.
It's the war between making an image look beautiful and making sure the AI actually remembers what the image is supposed to contain.
Right. And for years, researchers have been stuck in the middle of this battlefield, essentially just guessing their way to a temporary truce.
Exactly. But what DeepMind is proposing here is that we stop guessing. They claim they've found a way to take the art of tuning these models and turn it into a hard, rigorous science.
They're trying to solve what we call the information density seesaw. And if they're right, this solves one of the biggest headaches in generative AI, especially for video.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's try to visualize this seesaw, because I think this is the core friction that the whole paper tries to solve.
Right. Imagine a playground seesaw. On one side, you have generation.
Okay.
This is the part of the AI that just wants to paint a pretty picture. The generator loves simplicity. It wants a smooth, easy-to-read map of the world.
So if you give it a really simple summary of an image, say a cat on a mat, it can paint a gorgeous, coherent cat.
Exactly. But that summary is vague. A cat on a mat doesn't tell you if the cat is Persian or Siamese. It doesn't tell you if the mat is red or blue.
That sits on the other side of the seesaw.
Right. Reconstruction. If you want the AI to remember the exact texture of the fur or the weave of the rug, you have to pack that summary full of complex data.
You have to increase the information density.
Precisely. You make the summary incredibly dense.
But when you do that,
The generator panics. It looks at this dense, complex, jagged summary, and it treats it like noise. It gets totally confused.
and the image comes out looking like static or like a broken mosaic.
Exactly. So you're stuck on the seesaw. You either get a beautiful image that's slightly wrong, hallucinating details that weren't in the prompt, or you get an accurate image that's blurry and ugly because the generator just couldn't handle the complexity.
And that right there is the generative learning trilemma. You want quality, you want diversity, meaning capturing all the details, and you want speed.
And historically, you could only pick two.
Right. And until this paper, the industry solution was basically just tweaking knobs until it looked good enough.
It was pure heuristic guesswork. It was literally engineers sitting in a room saying, let's turn the penalty up a bit. Oh, wait, no, that's too blurry. Turn it down. No, now it's jagged.
It wasn't math, it was vibes.
It really was just vibes.
So before we get into how Unified Latents fixes this, we should probably look at the legacy systems. Because UL didn't just appear in a vacuum, it's a direct reaction to the flaws of the past.
Right. So we started with GANs, generative adversarial networks.
The speed demons.
Exactly. They made very pretty images very fast, but they suffered from mode collapse.
Which means they just ignored the hard stuff, right?
Basically, if a Jan couldn't figure out how to draw a specific type of complex texture, it would just skip it. It would only generate the easy stuff. So you had great quality, but terrible coverage.
Then we swung entirely to the other extreme with VAEs, variational autoencoders.
Right, and the mathematicians loved VAEs because they didn't miss anything. They captured every single mode of the data.
But the images were universally blurry.
Terribly blurry. They couldn't handle the high-frequency details, the sharp edges, and the crisp textures were just gone.
And more recently, we've been living in the era of diffusion.
Specifically, pixel space diffusion. This is the heavy artillery. It calculates every single pixel individually. The quality is unbeatable.
But the computational cost is astronomical.
Astronomical. You're asking the model to solve 1 million math problems just to generate one single image.
So the industry had to compromise. And we got latent diffusion models, or LDMs. This is the tech behind things like stable diffusion.
Right. They compress the image first into a latent space and then run diffusion on that summary. It was supposed to be the best of both worlds.
Or so we thought. But DeepMind points out a massive structural flaw here.
Yes. Standard LDMs are trained in 2 disjointed stages. Think of it like 2 colleagues working on the same exact project, but they work in completely different buildings, and they never speak to each other.
The 2 buildings problem.
Exactly. In building A, you train the compressor, the autoencoder. You teach it how to summarize images.
Okay.
Then you lock the doors, freeze that model, and you walk over to building B. And there, you try to train the generator to understand the summaries that are coming out of building A.
But the generator was never involved in making those summaries in the first place.
No. So they are completely misaligned. The
Huh.
generator looks at the summary and says, what is this? This is way too complex.
And the compressor says, well, I can't simplify it or we lose data.
Right. And because they are in different buildings, they literally cannot negotiate.
So you wind up back on that seesaw.
Exactly. And that brings us to unified latents. The name itself implies the fix. They are tearing down the walls between those buildings.
They're unifying the process.
Instead of disjointed stages, UL connects the encoder, the prior, and the decoder into a single, continuous mathematical equation. They train them to negotiate in real time.
They break the solution down into 3 pillars. And I want to walk through these because this is where the actual innovation sits. It gets a little technical, but the logic is fascinating.
It really is.
So pillar 1 is the maximum precision link.
Right. This deals with the encoder, and this is arguably the most technical hurdle they had to clear. To understand why, you kind of have to look at a failed experiment from a few years ago called LSGM.
I remember reading about that one. It was an earlier attempt to train everything at once, wasn't it?
It was. But it failed because the math just kept exploding. It used what's called a stochastic encoder. It tried to predict both the mean and the variance of the data.
And that's bad.
Well, without getting too deep into the calculus, the entropy term in the equation would just shoot off to infinity. The model was incredibly unstable.
Exploding gradients.
Exactly. So DeepMind looked at that and said, okay, the problem is we're asking the model to guess the variance. Let's stop guessing.
So they switched to a deterministic encoder.
Yes. In unified latents, the encoder takes the image and adds a fixed amount of Gaussian noise. They set the log signal-to-noise ratio to exactly 5.
Okay, wait, why add noise? That feels completely counterintuitive. If you're listening and you want a clear image, why are you adding static to it?
Think of it as a noise floor. It's a challenge for the encoder.
Yeah.
By adding a specific fixed amount of noise, you are basically telling the encoder, if a detail is smaller or quieter than this static, you are not allowed to keep it.
Oh, wow.
You must focus only on the strong, important signals.
It forces efficiency. It stops the encoder from obsessing over microscopic junk data.
It creates a hard cutoff. And because that noise level is fixed, it's hard-coded to 5, the math can't explode. There's no variance to guess anymore. It stabilizes the entire system.
Okay, so we have a stable encoder. That leads us directly to pillar 2, prior alignment.
Right.
This is about the prior, which is the part of the brain that organizes the concepts.
And this is where they solve the guessing problem regarding information density. In the old way, engineers would just guess how much compression to use. But in UL, they use an unweighted ELBO.
ELBO stands for evidence lower bound.
Right. By using the unweighted version, they can strictly measure bits per dimension.
Which means what exactly for the listener?
It means they have a speedometer for information. They aren't feeling out the density anymore. They're calculating exactly how many bits of information are flowing through that bottleneck.
It turns that seesaw sensation into a hard, measurable metric. So they know exactly how much data is being compressed. But here's the thing that confused me at first. If the encoder is ignoring the tiny details, because of that noise floor, that static we just mentioned, where do those details go?
Right.
Because we still want sharp images, right?
Yeah.
We don't want a blurry cat.
That is the genius of Pillar 3, the diffusion decoder.
Because usually a decoder is just a translator. It takes the summary and just turns it back into pixels.
In standard models, yes. But in unified latents, the decoder is also a generative diffusion model.
Wait, so the decoder is hallucinating too?
In a controlled way, yes. DeepMind applies something called sigmoid weighting, based on some really influential work by Kingma and Gao.
Okay.
This weighting effectively tells the decoder, hey, don't worry about the big picture. Is it a cat or a dog? The latent space already has that covered. Your job is to hallucinate the texture.
So it's a division of labor. The latent space handles the semantics, the concepts, and the decoder handles the high-frequency details. The fur, the whiskers, the lighting grain.
Precisely. Because the decoder is a generative model, it doesn't just reconstruct the texture pixel by pixel, it generates plausible texture based on the summary.
Which completely eliminates the blurriness you used to get with those old VAEs. It fills in the gaps left by the noise floor.
You've got it.
So we have a fixed encoder, a measured prior, and a generative decoder. It sounds like a perfect, unified system. But then I got to the section on training, And there's a massive plot twist.
Oh, yeah, there really is. You read all this way about unified training, and then they tell you they do it in 2 stages anyway.
Right. I was like, if the math is so good, why split it up again?
It comes down to the difference between mathematical truth and human perception.
Explain that for us.
So in stage 1, they do the joint optimization. They train everything together. Encoder, prior, decoder. This ensures they all speak the exact same language. The encoder learns to compress exactly how the decoder likes it.
Okay, so the system is fluent. The colleagues in the 2 buildings are finally talking to each other.
Right, but remember that unweighted ELBO used for the prior? It's mathematically rigorous, it prioritizes likelihood, making the data statistically probable. But it turns out, models trained purely on likelihood produce images that are statistically accurate but, well, kind of boring.
Boring how? Like they're dull.
They lack that visual pop. They don't look artistic or photorealistic in the way humans actually prefer. They are just mathematically correct soup.
So the math is right, but the vibes are completely off.
Exactly. So they introduce stage 2. They freeze the autoencoder. They lock it in place. Then they throw away the prior from stage 1. They literally just delete it. And they train a huge new base model.
And this new base model uses that sigmoid weighting we talked about.
Yes, which biases the model toward what actually looks good to human eyes. And because the autoencoder is frozen, they don't have to waste compute calculating gradients for it.
Oh, smart.
They can use all their power to scale this base model up to massive sizes. We're talking zettaflops of compute.
So stage 1 is to build the structure, the bones of the system. Stage 2 is to make it huge and beautiful.
That's the winning formula. Train the language first, then write the poetry.
I love that. Let's talk about the wins. What does this actually achieve in the real world?
The benchmarks are formidable. On ImageNet 512, which is a standard high-res image benchmark, UL achieves an FID of 1.4.
And for you listening, FID is the standard, this image good score. Lower is better. So is 1.4 a big deal?
It's excellent. It beats the standard stable diffusion models we're all used to, but crucially, it does this while being far more efficient than those pixel space models like SID2.
It's getting pixel space quality with latent space speed.
Exactly.
But I think the real headline here, and the paper spends a lot of time on this, is video.
Oh, absolutely. Video is the killer app for this architecture.
How do they adapt it for video?
They use the exact same framework, but swapped in a 3D encoder. So instead of just compressing a 2D image, they compress 16 frames of video, both time and space, into a single summary.
And what were the results there?
On the Kinetics 600 benchmark, they hit an FED fresh-J video distance of 1.3. That is a new global state-of-the-art.
Why is UL so much better at video than previous models?
Yeah.
Because video AI is notorious for looking really weird.
Mm-hmm.
You get things morphing, flickering backgrounds, limbs appearing out of nowhere.
That flickering comes from the latent space being jagged. If your summary is jagged, moving through it is bumpy.
Like driving off-road.
Exactly. When you move from frame 1 to frame 2, you hit a bump in the math and the background flickers. But because UL forces a smooth, regularized latent space via that noise floor and the diffusion prior, the video model can navigate from frame 1 to frame 16 perfectly smoothly.
The map is smooth, so the drive is smooth.
It solves the jitter problem at the mathematical level, not by post-processing, but by fundamental design.
Now, there was one finding in the paper that I found really surprising. It's about scaling laws. Because usually in compression, we think, keep the file size small. Be efficient.
Right, we always want to compress more.
But UL found that as models get bigger, that logic completely reverses.
Yes, and this is probably the most insightful takeaway for the future of AI design. They looked at the loss factor. This effectively controls the bitrate, how much info goes into the latent space.
Okay.
They found that if you push a high bitrate, lots of complex info into a small model, it just collapses.
It breaks.
The model just isn't smart enough to handle the complexity. The reconstruction looks great, but it can't generate anything new. It effectively just memorizes the training data.
It's like trying to explain quantum physics to a toddler. They might repeat the words back to you, but they certainly can't write a new theory.
That is a perfect analogy. But when you use a large model, a massive base model, it absolutely loves high bitrates. It thrives on the complexity.
It's hungry for data.
It really is. A large model has the capacity to understand those fine details. It can reconstruct the images perfectly and generate new creative ones using that high-density information.
So the implication here is, as we build bigger AI brains, which literally everyone is doing right now, we shouldn't be compressing the world more. We should be feeding them more information.
Correct. The scaling law implies that bandwidth should scale with compute. We've been starving these giant models with low bitrate latents. We need to open the hose.
That feels like a fundamental shift in how we design these things. It transforms model design from an art into an engineering discipline. You can actually predict the optimal bitrate based on your model size.
Which is exactly the goal. Move from alchemy to chemistry.
Okay, we've praised it enough. What's the catch? Because there is always a catch.
Always. The catch is the cost of quality, specifically inference latency.
It's slow.
It's very slow. Remember, the decoder is also a diffusion model.
Right, pillar 3.
So to generate an image, you have to run diffusion to create the latent summary.
And then run diffusion again to turn that summary into pixels.
Dual diffusion. You are effectively running the heavy generative process twice.
So for real-time applications,
Yeah.
like video games or instant generation on my phone, this is a no-go right now.
Currently, yes. The paper acknowledges this explicitly. They suggest that future work will need distillation.
Meaning teaching a faster, simpler model to mimic the slow, complex one.
Exactly, to speed up the decoding step.
So we need another breakthrough to make this breakthrough fast enough for the real world.
Likely, yes. But the quality gain is so high, especially in video, that the motivation to solve the speed issue will be immense.
They also did some ablation studies, basically taking the model apart to see if the pieces are actually necessary. I always love these because they prove whether the theory holds up or if it's just fluff.
And they were quite revealing. For instance, they removed the diffusion the part that measures the bitrate, and replaced it with a standard normal distribution, like in old VAEs.
Now what happened?
Total collapse. The model failed immediately. It proves that the active gradient signal from the diffusion prior is strictly necessary to organize the information. You can't just use a static map. The map has to be alive.
What about the noise floor? That specific number, 5.
Same thing. If they made the noise too small, the model just stopped using the latent space effectively. It just dumped all the information into the decoder because it was easier. It proves the maximum precision link isn't just a setting, it's a load-bearing wall.
Fascinating. One other thing you mentioned was semi-supervised learning. How does that fit into all this?
This is about connecting UL to the wider world of AI. Right now, a lot of people use pre-trained models like DynoV2 or CLAP to encode images because they understand semantics really well.
Right. CLIP knows what a vintage car looks like. It understands the concept.
Exactly. But those models are terrible at high-frequency details. If you try to reconstruct an image from CLIP, it looks like a blurry mess. It gets the concept, but not the pixels.
So how does UL help there?
The UL framework could theoretically combine with these. You could inject CLIP embeddings right into the UL encoder, so you get the deep semantic understanding of CLIP, plus the perfect texture reconstruction of the Unified Latents decoder.
The best of both worlds. Conceptually smart, visually sharp.
That's the hope.
So we've covered the history, the math, the results, and the speed limit. But I want to zoom out for our final thought. The expert in the paper made a comment about this being substrate neutral.
Yes, this is the most provocative part for me.
What does that actually mean?
It means the math doesn't care that it's looking at pixels.
Okay.
The paper focuses on images and video, but the core principle, encoding data into a continuous, regularized, latent space and decoding it with a diffusion model, that could theoretically apply to text.
To large language models.
Yes. Right now, LLMs work on discrete tokens. Words, they are choppy. A word is either cat or dog. There's nothing in between. But if you could treat language as a continuous signal, unified under this same mathematical law,
you could have a single model that handles text, image, video, and audio, not just by gluing them together, but by using the exact same underlying physics.
A truly unified multimodal model. We aren't there yet. But Unified Latents provides the mathematical blueprint for how you might actually build it. It's suggesting that all data, whether it's Shakespeare or a video of a sunset, can be treated as the same kind of signal.
That is a massive idea to chew on. We move from the art of tuning to the science of bounds, and now potentially to the physics of all data.
And that shift is what allows us to stop guessing and start scaling.
Well, on that note, we are going to wrap up this deep dive.
It's been a real pleasure exploring the math with you.
And thank you to you listening for taking this deep dive into Unified Latents with us. We'll catch you on the next one.